Sometimes the smallest act of kindness, the one no one notices, no one rewards, becomes the spark that changes everything. And sometimes, justice doesn't come in the way we expect. It arrives quietly, like the rising sun after the darkest night. This is the story of a taxi driver named Ibrahim, and how one simple choice, to help a struggling pregnant woman for free, would turn his entire life upside down by the very next morning. The streets were quiet that night. The rain tapped against the windshield of an old yellow taxi, paint peeling on the sides, headlights dim. Behind the wheel sat Ibrahim, a man in his late 40s. His face was lined with exhaustion, the kind that comes not just from long hours, but from long years of struggle. His shirt clung to him with sweat. The cab's air conditioning hadn't worked in months. But he drove on because rent was due, because his children's school fees were piling up, because life never gave him the luxury of rest. Every passenger mattered. Every fare counted. Except tonight, fate had something different in store. At the side of the road, near a dimly lit bus stop, stood a young woman in her early 30s. Her clothes were damp from the rain, her hands clutching her swollen belly. She was pregnant, very pregnant, and clearly in distress. Cars passed her by without stopping. Drivers glanced at her, then drove on. To them, she was just another burden, another delay. But Ibrahim slowed his taxi. He rolled down the window. "Madam, are you all right?" he asked. Her voice trembled. "Please, I need to get to the hospital. Now. I don't have enough money, but I'll pay whatever I can later, I promise." Ibrahim didn't hesitate. "Get in," he said firmly. "Don't worry about the money." As she climbed in, holding her stomach, Ibrahim pressed his foot on the pedal and sped off into the night. The woman's breathing was heavy, her face pale. Between gasps, she whispered, "Thank you, everyone else ignored me." Ibrahim shook his head. "Some things are worth more than money." The rain poured harder. The roads glistened like black glass. His old wipers screeched against the windshield, barely clearing the view. But Ibrahim didn't slow down. He didn't think about the fact that he'd already worked 16 hours straight. He didn't think about the fare he was losing. All he thought about was this woman, and the life she was carrying. They arrived at the hospital just in time. Nurses rushed to the woman's side as she was wheeled into the emergency ward. She clutched Ibrahim's hand one last time. "May God bless you," she whispered through tears. Ibrahim smiled faintly. "Take care of your baby. That's all that matters." And then he left. No name exchanged. No phone number. No payment. Just a quiet act of kindness, soon forgotten by the world, but not by fate. What Ibrahim didn't know was that the woman he had just helped wasn't just any expectant mother. She was connected to someone powerful. Someone who would soon change Ibrahim's life in ways he never thought possible. Because by the next morning, the entire city would know his name. After dropping the woman at the hospital, Ibrahim drove off into the darkness. The rain hadn't stopped. His clothes were damp, his eyelids heavy, but he still needed to work. He circled the city, searching for passengers. The truth was, Ibrahim couldn't afford to give free rides. His landlord had already threatened to evict his family if rent wasn't paid by the end of the week. His children's school had sent yet another warning letter about unpaid fees. And his wife, she had been ill lately, but medicine cost money they didn't have. Every fare mattered. But tonight, he had chosen compassion over money. At a red light, another taxi driver pulled up beside him. "Ibrahim," the man shouted through the window. "Why did you pick up that pregnant woman? She had no money. Everyone saw it." Ibrahim forced a tired smile. "Because she needed help." The man scoffed. "Help won't pay your rent. One day, your kindness will ruin you." The light turned green, and the cars drove off in opposite directions. But the words stayed with him. By the time Ibrahim reached home, the night had bled into dawn. His wife, Miriam, was waiting at the door, her face etched with worry. "You're late," she whispered. "I had a passenger," he said softly, avoiding her eyes. Inside their small apartment, the air smelled of damp clothes and kerosene. Their two children, a boy of 10 and a girl of 7, were still asleep on a thin mattress. Ibrahim gazed at them for a moment. They were his reason for everything. Miriam broke the silence. "The landlord came again yesterday. He says if we don't pay by Friday, we're out. Ibrahim sighed. I know. Her eyes filled with tears. What will we do? He placed a hand on her shoulder. I'll find a way. I always do. But deep inside, he wasn't sure. The next morning, the city buzzed with unusual excitement. Newspapers carried a front-page story. Ibrahim nearly dropped his cup of tea when he saw the headline at a roadside kiosk. The woman he had helped last night. Her story was everywhere. According to the paper, she had safely delivered a baby boy at the hospital. She was the wife of Mr. Samuel Okoro, one of the country's most respected businessmen and philanthropists. He owned companies, charities, even hospitals. And now he was searching for the unnamed taxi driver who had helped his wife when no one else would. Ibrahim! One of the other taxi drivers shouted as he waved the newspaper. That's you, isn't it? You were the one who helped her. Ibrahim quickly shook his head. No, it wasn't me. But his heart pounded. He didn't want attention. He didn't want promises. He just wanted to survive another day. Still, fate had already chosen a different path for him. Later that morning, Ibrahim parked his cab near the market. He overheard two wealthy men in suits talking as they bought roasted corn. Can you believe it? One said. A billionaire's wife nearly gave birth on the roadside, and the only one to help her was some poor taxi driver. The other laughed. Poor people always look for attention. Watch, this driver will probably come begging for a reward. Ibrahim clenched the steering wheel. His knuckles turned white. He hadn't asked for anything. He hadn't even given his name. And yet, already, people were twisting his intentions. The irony burned inside him. He had given without expecting anything. And now, people were judging him as if kindness was a trick. That evening, as Ibrahim prepared to head home, he heard news on the radio. Mr. Okoro was offering a cash reward and lifetime support for the driver who had helped his wife. Hospitals, schools, and even the press were talking about it. But not everyone was happy. Some said the story was fake. Others claimed the woman had exaggerated. Some even said the taxi driver didn't deserve anything after all. He was just doing his job. Ibrahim sat quietly in his cab listening. He didn't know it yet. But tomorrow, his life would never be the same. The following day, Ibrahim tried to disappear into his routine. He picked up passengers, dropped them off, and kept his head down. But it was impossible to ignore the whispers. Everywhere he went, people were talking about the mysterious taxi driver. Radios played the story on loop. Social media was filled with hashtags. And in every conversation, one question repeated. Who was he? Ibrahim's heart raced each time a passenger looked at him too long, as if trying to match his face to the story. He prayed no one would recognize him. He didn't want fame. He didn't want trouble. But trouble has a way of finding those who least expect it. By the third day, Ibrahim's secret was out. A nurse from the hospital, who had seen him that night, recognized his cab. Within hours, his name spread across the city. Some people cheered him. Strangers patted his back. Passengers insisted on paying double for their rides. For the first time in years, Ibrahim felt seen. Not as a poor, struggling man, but as a human being whose kindness mattered. But others weren't so kind. At the taxi park, a few jealous drivers mocked him. So, Ibrahim, now you're a hero? One sneered. Another spat on the ground. You think you're better than us because you gave a free ride? He tried to ignore them, but the sting of their words cut deep. He hadn't asked for this attention. He had only done what was right. That evening, a black SUV pulled up beside Ibrahim's taxi. A man in a suit stepped out and handed him an envelope. Inside was a formal invitation. Mr. Samuel Okoro requests your presence at his residence tomorrow morning. Ibrahim's hands trembled as he read the letter. He showed it to Miriam when he got home. She clutched it like a sacred scroll. This is it, she whispered. Our chance. Maybe our prayers are finally being answered. But Ibrahim wasn't so sure. He had lived long enough to know that promises were fragile things, easily broken. The next morning, Ibrahim dressed in his cleanest shirt, though it was still faded at the collar. His children polished his worn shoes until they shone faintly. Miriam tied his scarf around his neck with trembling hands. When he arrived at the Okoro mansion, he was overwhelmed. The gates were taller than any building in his neighborhood. The driveway stretched longer than the street he lived on. Inside, chandeliers glittered above marble floors. Servants moved silently in the background. And at the center of it all stood Samuel Okoro himself. A man in his late 50s, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and sharp eyes softened only by kindness. Beside him sat his wife, pale but smiling, cradling a newborn baby. As Ibrahim entered, Mr. Okoro rose. "This is the man," he said loudly, his voice echoing through the hall. "This is the driver who saved my family." Everyone turned to look at Ibrahim. His knees weakened under the weight of their gaze. But not all eyes were kind. Among the guests were wealthy businessmen, government officials, and journalists. Some clapped politely, others whispered skeptically. One man scoffed. "So this is your hero? A taxi driver? Surely anyone would have done the same." The word stung. Ibrahim lowered his head. For a moment, he felt as small as he always had, just a poor man in a rich man's world. But Mr. Okoro stood firm. "No," he said sharply. "Not everyone would have done the same. Dozens of cars passed my wife that night. Dozens of men and women looked away. But he stopped. He cared. And because of him, my son is alive." The hall fell silent. Even the skeptics had no reply. Okoro turned to Ibrahim. "My friend, your act of kindness will not be forgotten. From this day forward, you and your family will never struggle again. Your children's education, fully funded. Your debts, cleared. And as long as you live, you will never lack a roof over your head." Ibrahim's eyes filled with tears. His voice broke. "Sir, I don't deserve all this. I only did what anyone should do." Okoro placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "That's exactly why you deserve it. Because you gave without expecting. Because in a world full of selfishness, you chose compassion." The room erupted in applause. For the first time in his life, Ibrahim wasn't invisible. He wasn't just a struggling taxi driver. He was proof that kindness matters, that the smallest act can echo louder than wealth, status, or power. When Ibrahim returned home that evening, his children ran to him. His wife embraced him with tears of joy. Their tiny apartment, once filled with worry, now glowed with hope. And Ibrahim realized something profound. He had always believed his poverty made him powerless. But in truth, his greatest power was his heart, the ability to help another human being, even when he had nothing to give. From that day on, whenever he drove his cab, he did so with pride. Not because of the reward he had received, but because he knew the truth. Sometimes, the poorest hands carry the richest hearts. And as for those who mocked him, those who doubted him, they were left with silence. Because justice had been served in the most unexpected way.